Good afternoon, my name is Ola Atamanova and I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. It's been 9 years of the war and today's day 422 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and I traditionally want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about this war and heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people. I want to introduce our speaker today. It's Vasyl Bodnar, Ukraine's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary to Turkey. Good afternoon, Mr. Vasyl. Good afternoon. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Mr. Vasyl, what is discussed by everybody now, the topic that has the attention of both society and media, is the grain deal. So for the time being, what are the news from that front? How is this mechanism operating and what are the news? Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for your attention to this question. The matter of the grain deal is currently on the agenda of not only Ukraine and Turkey, but on the other countries of the region, because it's important to provide the supply of our grain to the external markets. Since the beginning of the grain deal, Russia was not quite cooperative in this initiative. There were news about the rocket attack of the ports, the strikes of the vessels, the strikes of the logistic chains to deter the advance of the grain deal, and within the last couple of days we were witnessing the attempts by Russia to use their presence in the Joint Coordination Center to regulate, in fact, the operation of the Ukrainian ports and to interfere the commercial agreements entered into by the Ukrainian manufacturers, those who sell the grain, and the companies who buy that. On 17th and 18th of April, the transportation was blocked due to the slow operation of the inspections. Russians tried to impose their list of vessels, and that's yet another level of cynicism, because they were trying not to allow the grain deal to work properly. I can say that starting from the November 2022, and this information is confirmed by our Prime Minister Kubrakov, thanks to the actions of the Russian party, we were unable to export from 15 to 18 tons of Ukrainian grain due to the obstacling of by Russian inspections of the passage of vessels through the Bosphorus Strait. On the 18th of April, there was a visit by Mr. Kubrakov to Turkey. There were negotiations with Turkish Defense Minister Osiakar, who is responsible for the operation of the grain deal on Turkish side. The parties reached agreement, and the mechanism was developed to resume the operation of the mechanism and the transportation of the vessels, the loading of the vessels which are exiting Ukrainian ports. And we don't expect Russians to open the passage of the vessels to the full extent, because obviously this initiative is not interesting to them. They try to push their proposals as to the export of different kinds of mineral fertilizers manufactured in Russia, and they don't want the Ukrainian grain to reach the external markets, the global markets, to the full extent. We cooperate with the Turkish side and the representatives of United Nations. We try to do everything possible to make sure that our manufacturers transport as much products as it's necessary in a view of those restrictions that were imposed by our neighbors from the West, and which looked as synchronized actions by all sides, by the way. Mr. Vasyl, talking about today, has the process already resumed? Do we see anything exiting Ukrainian ports, and what vessels are being inspected at the moment? Well, look, the vessels are exiting the ports, in fact, but it's the matter of inspections. Just for yesterday and today, there were only 2 vessels agreed to be entering and another 2 to be exiting the ports, and it will make more than a 10 during a week, but it's the ruination of the constructive policy, and it's important to keep the constructive approach with our mediators in this deal. It's important to stimulate them to have the resolutions taken in a way that would be in accord with the interests of Ukrainian side and the markets, because it will directly influence the price of the grain in the international markets, and then and the supplies of that grain to those countries which need them the most. And if the grain doesn't reach the processing facilities in China or Turkey or Spain, that will result that the products made of this grain would not reach the markets of Asia and Africa further on. Mr. Vasil, we understand that another challenge for us will be, well, we understand that Russians use any opportunity to block the operation of the grain corridor. They state that on 18th of May for them the grain deal expires. This date is not confirmed by either Turkish or Ukrainian side, but still we understand that the risk exists. And I would like to ask you, in Turkey, from the Turkish point of view, is Turkish side ready to decisive support of Ukraine as it was happening, for example, in November? Well, Turkish side expressed their readiness to support Ukraine, and they confirm it with their actions and with the agreements reached by the Minister of Defense of Turkey and our Vice Prime Minister for Infrastructure. So based on the practical interest and our political cooperation, we see that we have support by Ankara. The only thing we have to take into account that there will be elections on the 14th of May in Turkey, and what will happen next is difficult to forecast, because we don't know whether there will be another round of elections, and how this elections process will influence the support of the grain deal. There is a number of factors that Russians are trying to impose, including the conditions of the agreement itself. The agreement is entered into for a term of 120 days, and there is no such term as 60 or 90 days contemplated by it. And if the need to review the agreement will arise, we will need the requirements of the Ukrainian side will be needed to be taken into account in terms of expansion of number of ports and unblocking of other ports. So our position as stance is quite strict. We work to have this grain deal expanded both in terms and its geography. Dear colleagues, if we have any questions on the floor, please go ahead. Good afternoon, Nadia Yurchenko, Ukrinform. I would like to ask for a couple of details. Ukrainian side stated that Russia keeps blocking the inspection of the vessels. Is it being documented in any way, or are we just stating the fact? Is it confirmed in any way? Can we fortify our position in any way? Well, obviously everything is being documented, because the operation of the center itself, there are 4 sites working in this center. All those inspections are being documented by the secretariat of the center. The reports are being compiled as to the work of the international teams. Yes, we document everything, and when we review the matters of blocking of the grain initiative in the courts, for example, the negative in the International Criminal Court, when we review the actions of Russia as to the blocking of the operation of grain deal, we will see sometimes criminal actions of Russia which are related to the war of Russia in Ukraine. And another question, when Russia was stating that they will let the agreement work only for 60 days. They informed United Nations and Turkey on their intentions. Did those conditions became a subject to negotiations in Turkey? Probably you said that the agreement may be reviewed or amended. Well, those processes are parallel. You know, on the 20th of July 2022, there were two agreements. First, memorandum between Russia and United Nations as to cooperation aimed at export of agricultural products. UN promised to support Russia in exporting their agricultural products in ammoniac fertilizers, and those were the issues related to sanctions imposed by Western countries on Russian companies, and the sanctions related to the entrance to the port and to the ports and insurance. As if we review the structure of the document, is the memorandum of intentions, and if we sort everything out, so neither Ukraine nor the mediators have nothing to do with the actions which were imposed by the Western countries in response to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So in this case, even if any mediator would like to assist in implementation of that memorandum, there would be no practical opportunities to do that. Then negotiations are needed with those countries who impose their restrictions and sanctions. So let's take the fundamental reasons. I think, my opinion is that the grain deal is the solution to the situation, but it's restriction of Ukrainian sovereignty, because we cannot export all of the products as we are allowed in compliance with the international law. For example, if Russians want to block the deal on the 18th of May, neither party, none of the mediators would support Russia in their intentions. But when 18th of May comes, we will see how every country will act. And taking into account the internal situation in Turkey, we will see to what extent may United Nations press on Russia to continue the deal, to extend the deal. We would probably be in need to have the plan B and plan C prepared. If Russians will create any more obstacles or block the deal or threat the ports, we have to calculate all the options. And I think that the emergency plan is being currently drawn up, and for our partners it's an important signal that Russia is not a reliable negotiator. They don't comply with their own obligations that they have undertaken before. Dear colleagues, do we have any more questions on the floor? Another question is with regard to another topic regarding the Turkish UAV. We were talking about during previous press conference about the testing. Is it possible that Ukraine gets those drones someday? Well, obviously yes. Well, look, there were 8 test flights of this unmanned aerial vehicle of the new generation, of the new level. It demonstrates very good performance. There were new technical solutions implemented with landing gear and different modes of engine operation, and those specimens that are being used for the time being, they demonstrate their perspectiveness. Our corporations and the companies which are involved in the project continue cooperating. There are visits from both sides. We don't cover those visits for obvious reasons, but for us it's an important moment of cooperation. And also let's take into account the fact that when or if there will be a factory built, they will be able to build the whole range of the Bayraktar products, including the UAVs, which in their performance have to cover certain needs of the Air Force. And in my opinion, it's one of the perspective models for air defense and other tasks that Ukraine is facing in military terms. Mr. Ambassador, getting back to the grain deal and the operation of the grain corridor, Ukraine mentioned that we're looking for an opportunity to expand the number of ports involved in the grain deal. So the talks were about the port of Mykolaiv. Is this issue still on the agenda in the negotiations? Well, let's see the real situation. The grain deal was entered into on the 22nd July last year. It was done first of all, thanks to the actions of the armed forces of Ukraine, who pushed Russians from the southern part of Ukraine, from the Black Sea shores, Black Sea ports. So when Russians cannot dictate their conditions to them, when there is no threat to them, when our vessels can go through our waterways, which are controlled by Ukraine, it all is happening only thanks to the decisive actions of the armed forces of Ukraine. For the time being, Mykolaiv and exit from Mykolaiv and Kherson are under the fire control of the enemy. Even if we reach any agreement with them, there will be no guarantee that those waterways would not be used against the defense forces. So those are the security risks that should be taken into account before we even start talking about expansion of the ports which are involved in the operation of the grain deal. I'm saying this because I know for sure that in Mykolaiv there are currently 6 vessels which belong to the Turkish companies, and the sea line is mined there, and those vessels, and there are still negotiations going on as to the pulling those vessels out of the port back to Turkey. And even if we push the enemy from the area from where they can exercise the fire control over the mentioned port, so since the very beginning of the operation of the grain deal, we were proposing to add the port of Mykolaiv, which would create some security zone under the framework of some formal control. Formal procedures may be controlled by the United Nations to establish the exit and entrance to the port of Mykolaiv, but in reality everything is achieved by the work of the defense forces and not United Nations, for whom we were relying on, who are really our big partners. But the physical liberation of the Ukrainian territories from the enemy will ensure the proper operation of the grain deal and opportunity to add the port of Mykolaiv to the grain deal. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for this broadcast. I'm reminding you, joining us was Vasil Bodnar, Ukraine's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary to Turkey, and at 2:30 p.m. I invite you to take part in the panel discussion, results of the first Black Sea Security Conference of the International Crimea Platform, which has taken place in Romania last week. Joining us will be Emina Japarova, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Alina Frolova, Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine in 2019-2020, Olga Skripnik, a board chairperson at the Crimean Human Rights Group, Alexander Harat, diplomat, foreign and security policy expert at the Center for Defense Strategies. So bear with us. Trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.